Hey, welcome back to part 4 of this exercise where we're building a one-page layout using HTML and CSS with the help of Dreamweaver CC in order to build a page that looks something like this. We're going to try to approximate it as much as possible. So here's the mockup we're working from, and here's our page so far. In the previous videos, we've seen how to basically structure everything and kick things off. And now we've broken it down into components that are manageable. For example, creating a structure that resembles the page. And in our last video, we saw how to build this navigation bar from scratch using the list that was already there for us. Next, what we're going to be doing is adding some color to this site. We'll do that by, assigning a background, as we see over here. We will be opening up Photoshop in order to grab these images from the mockup and optimize them so that they look great on the screen, but also are efficient in terms of file size, because we don't want people downloading huge files, and we want to make sure that our images are scaled properly and cropped properly so that they fit nicely within our design. Now, the advantages of working with this type of mockup is we know exactly down to the pixel what things look like and what size they have to be. It takes all the guesswork out of it. So let's start with the easy stuff. We're going to add a background, this little dark background that we see on the mockup. Let's add that to our page to give it a bit of dimension. And it's kind of stark right now, so it'll help a bit with that. So there are a couple ways of doing it. One is just to assign a background color, but if we zoom in here, we'll notice that there's a nice little texture that's assigned to this particular background, which means that it probably uses an image that tiles over and over again seamlessly to create the illusion of a huge graphic, but really it's a small graphic that just tiles together without any noticeable seams between the tiles. So I believe in the downloads that you picked up the files from the beginning of the course. It should have a folder in there called backgrounds. So let's look. Let's go back to our original download folder here. In the assets, you should see background patterns zip in there. So what you can do is extract all, and it's going to open up a whole slew of them. Done. In a folder called background patterns. Yeah, so at this point you can delete the zip file. You don't really need it because you've unzipped them. And you have a folder here with all the background patterns that you need. There's a nice selection over here. Feel free to browse through them. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but use something that makes sense. So we have our background patterns extracted. Here's a green one. That one might be a little too light. Orange, you get away with that, but here's a nice one. It's called Hicks Pattern Evolution. Okay, so I'm going to choose this one because it's nice and dark. It'll make my main page pop. So once I've identified it, we're going to go and set that as the background on our page. So switch back to Dreamweaver. And what we'll need for this one is the Properties panel to be open. If you already have it open, you'll find it down here at the bottom. And the properties, you'll notice there are two tabs here on the left. One is for HTML, which is when you're working on site structure stuff, you have access to certain things. But you can also switch to CSS, which contains some global properties and values for the page. So what we're doing now is we're going to change the body tag, because the body is really where all our components are. But there's also another way of doing it. So instead of just targeting the body tag, which would mean clicking here and assigning the different values, if you switch to design view, if you're not already in it, you'll notice in CSS it'll trigger the page properties box to become available. So if you click here, page properties, it'll open up a little dialog box which provides you with a lot more options, and you can see the big picture of what you can do. So these are page properties, which means these are global values. And you can see we've already assigned ASAP as the page font, right? We did that manually in one of the earlier lessons. And now you can, keep adding to that if you prefer, the text color, margins, paddings, all that business. And if you look over here, we can have a background image assigned to this page. So if we browse to the, in the assets folder, the background patterns we extracted, I chose which one was it? The Hicks pattern evolution. There are two files I can choose, and this goes a bit beyond the scope of this particular exercise, but one is standard size, the other one is high resolution for retina displays and other high resolution displays. For this exercise, let's just stick with the standard size over here, pattern evolution. It's the same exact file, the only difference is that this one is larger to accommodate the higher resolution of other devices. So let's click OK here after you select it. And for now, that's all we want. Repeat. Do we want this tile to repeat? Yes, we do want it to repeat. And the repetition will happen automatically X and Y axis, so X horizontal, Y vertical. If we don't specify, then it automatically does it. If we look at some other values you can change over here on the page, you can change the overall global margins of the page so that you don't have stuff stuck right up against the, the edge of your browser. You can change a few other things, and you'll notice that it alternates between CSS and HTML. Like again, there's more than one way to do this, and you can choose to do it in the CSS, or you could do it at the document level using HTML. I kind of like the CSS because it keeps all the graphics and visual stuff in one place. Headings, again, here's where we specified Paytone 1 as our global heading font. We even assigned it a specific color, and you can override more heading values like specific sizes and stuff, which will update the CSS file accordingly. So that's really all we need to do here. If we click apply, it will apply the background right away. So we're seeing something very unusual here. It was all fine and dandy until we assigned this background. Now our page looks very, very scary, I guess you could say. And the reason is because our main area that we were working in, you see if I hover my mouse over it, that orange line defines the main area of my site. We haven't defined a background color for this box. So the background is showing through this transparent area. When it was all white, it didn't really matter. But now it's like, whoa, we can't work like this. So a couple of things you want to do. If you switch to the site container, right, that's this big orange box that we had hovering over here that contains everything in our site. If we assign a background color to this big container that everything sits in, then it should block the background from passing through it. So let's select site container, scroll down to our colors. We want background right here, background color, and let's just go with white, nice pure white. It's FFFF all across. That's how you know you got the perfect white. And press enter, and there you go. So now that big box, which contains all our elements, is colored white. It doesn't let the background show through, and you've created a bit of depth between the page that you're working on with your background. So it makes it a bit easier. Now we can see things a lot more clearly. We can see that, hey, you know what, we probably need to add some padding at some point here so the text isn't flush against the edge, but these are details we can tackle later. Seeing as we're working with images, the next thing we want to do is tackle this big juicy one here in the middle. as well as if we look at our mockup, we'll notice that there's an image here, here, and here that we'll need to extract from the file itself. So we're going to use Photoshop to do that. And if you don't have Photoshop, the process is a bit trickier, but really all we're trying to do here is open up this image and from the mockup file, which we're using as a reference, crop out these images and save them as individual files, which we can then drop into our page. That's really the principle we're going after here. It's not magic or anything. But basically we want to crop this out, crop this one, and this one, save them as separate files, which we can then drop in using HTML and CSS for formatting. Now, Photoshop makes this a bit easier because it's kind of set up to work with these kind of files. So let's bring that up. There you go, fire up your Photoshop. And what you want to do, if you browse to your assets folder, the files that you downloaded, so in the Lebowski project, assets, you should have the site mockup.psd file. It's identical to the JPEG file. However, the PSD file still has its layers intact, so you can, access things in a different way. We're not even going to really need to worry about that. We just want to export a few things. So let's open. We get all sorts of, helpful Photoshop tools here, which we don't really need, so I'm going to cancel that. Close that. If it opens at this size, you can press Control+ to zoom in a little bit, and Control- to zoom out if you're not really familiar with Photoshop and how that works. So what we want to do here is grab this part of the image, this one, and this one. So I'm going to press Control+ to zoom in. If you press your space bar like this, it turns into the little hand. The little hand allows you to drag it in the viewport. If you don't want to use that kind of business, you can always use the sidebars over here to adjust the document where you want it to be. And of course, you can always use the magnifying glass over here to zoom in. And if you hold down the Alt key, you can zoom out. I believe it's the Command key on the Mac, I believe. So okay, we're at a zoom level that we can actually work with. What we want to do next is actually slice some things. You can crop individual parts of this image and export one individually, but it takes long and you have to redo things over and over again. So what we're going to do instead of cropping is we're going to slice, and I'll just zoom in over here so you can see what that tool looks like. On the left hand side in your toolbar, if you hold down this button, it'll pop out a little panel that you can choose other tools. So like slice tool is over here, and any one of these that has that little arrow in the corner, it means that if you hold your mouse button down, click and hold, it'll open up sub tools in that category. What we're looking for is the slice tool. And slicing refers to the old way of doing things where you would create your mock-up and slice everything like this. Like what we're going to do now is basically select select an area that we want to slice out, like this, for example. So from here to there. And Photoshop is pretty good about automatically detecting the edges of these images. And what it looks like, if I zoom in a little bit, is that you'll get these thin guidelines with numbers. So the blue one indicates that this is a user slice. The gray ones indicate that these are automatically generated. You don't need to worry about any of this stuff. Just follow along with me and you'll be fine. So this is our first slice. Next, we'll create another slice over here. Okay, try to be as accurate as possible. Feel free to zoom in a bit more. And if it's not exactly flush, you know, you can move the little bars to get it right up until the edge there. So the next one is here. Let's grab another little slice right over there. Done. And the last one is here. I'm going to do this one in a more sloppy way just so you can see what happens. If I miss my mark a little bit and I end up there, it's not the end of the world. I can just move my mouse to one of these little square areas and just drag it there. And it usually snaps when you get close enough to the edge. So try to be as accurate as possible, but not the end of the world if you're a pixel off or two. So now you have 1, 2, 3, 4 slices. To make your life easier, what we're going to do is name these slices. So we're going to switch tools now. So from the slice tool, we're going to go to the slice select tool. Similar, but different. This allows us to actually click and modify things. So we're done with the slicing. Now we want to add a few extra elements here to make our life a bit easier. Double click this blue box. Doesn't matter what the number says here, just double click the little blue area. And what that does is it opens up the options for this slice. So by default, you know, Photoshop is going to assign it the name Site Mockup 03. It means nothing. So give it a name that makes sense as a file name. We'll call this the hero_banner. Try to avoid leaving spaces in your file names. It'll just make your life a bit easier. Don't worry about alt tags and targets and URLs and all that stuff. We're just exporting the images. That's all we care about right now. Let's click OK there. Next, with the slice tool, double click the next one. So this one is, let's call it ice cream. Okay. And this one, we'll call it Kimbald. Okay. And what we're doing here is basically pre-assigning the file names so that when we export these as individual files, they'll already have file names assigned to them. We don't have to sit there renaming things in and we'll call this fashion dinosaur. This last one here. Nice. Click OK. So the hard part is over. That's it, guys. You know, you've identified the images you want. You've created the slices. You've assigned some values to them. Now you're ready to mass export them. So we go to File, Export, Save for Web. So just want to make sure you guys can see this. Go to File, Export, Save for Web. Now it says Legacy here because I think Photoshop is in the process of, Adobe's in the process of reworking this area. But for now, we still have access to it. So when you click Save for Web, it'll pop open this window here. The Save for Web window looks like this. And what it'll show you is your entire layout here with your slices. And if you now select these individual slices, it allows you to optimize each one of these individually. So let's take a quick look at this window here. I'll move this little guy over here. So the main image, right? Here it is. It's highlighted, selected. Over here in the top right, we can see what we can expect to export. So this is going to be a JPEG file, high quality, size 60% quality, which is pretty good. Optimized. Usually the defaults are pretty good. Now what we're going to have to change here is the actual size. No, because the values are already there. We don't have to resize anything. We don't have to scale anything. Let's just double check. So again, select the next image, the ice cream image. And up here in the top right, JPEG, quality 60. Again. And the reason we're doing this because some images you might want to export as a GIF. Some of them you want to export as a PNG. It depends. But in this case, we're just going to stick with JPEG. We'll look at image optimization, another exercise in the future. So yeah, just confirm that everything is okay. And another cool thing about this window is that if you select the image and you look at the bottom left corner down here, it'll give you a preview of how big that file is. So you can evaluate, you know, if it's too big, you know, long downloads should be avoided. You can play around with the quality and levels here to optimize that number. For example, if I change the quality to 40 and I look at that number again, now it's down to 75K. You know, I shaved off almost 30% of that file size just by changing a few things, and visually I can't tell the difference. So it might be a good trade-off there. What you don't want to do is go too far. So you choose low quality to the point where your image starts looking, you know, crusty here in the some color areas. So let's stick with high. That's it. Here comes the fun part, guys. Now we're going to save our files. So in the bottom right corner, click on Save. And we're going to be presented with this dialog box over here. Like, where do we want to save our files? So what we want to do is save it in our Assets folder, along with all the other images. Don't worry about file name, because we've already assigned values there. We want to export only the images. We don't want Photoshop generating any HTML for us. No, thank you. Settings should be fine, and slices, we only want user slices. So we only want, from this package, Photoshop to export the images that we've manually sliced. Otherwise, all the other grayed out areas, are going to be exported as well as, you know, automatic slices, which we don't want. It creates a lot of clutter. So if you click Save over here, you know, it happens really, really fast, and you're like, okay, what just happened? If you're not sure, go back to Dreamweaver, go back to your Files panel up here, and now if you look in your Assets folder, you should have some new stuff, a folder called Images. And in your images, check it out, you have your Fashion Dinosaur, your Hero Banner, and your Kimball. Basically all the files that we manually sliced out of that mockup, automatically saved for you, ready to go. So that saves a huge amount of time in the grand scheme of things. If you want to start bringing your, oops, let's zoom out here a little bit. There we go. So what happens next? We want to start by replacing this big image with this new one that we cropped right out of that mockup. There's a cool way of doing it. Obviously, if you go into your code, you click the image, it'll select it. So the image source right now is referencing a placeholder file from the internet, which it's nice but not great. If you look in your properties bar down here, that value is in the source box. All right, property source. If we want to add the new one, we just relink the folder. So click the little folder icon, and in your assets, browse to the images folder and choose the herobanner.jpg. Click OK. Move them out. Click OK, and boom, there you go. It's now replaced the placeholder address with that JPEG file. quick and easy, just the way we like it. Another way of doing it, I'm just going to undo very quickly. There you go. Another way of doing it that's even faster and always, is always a kick to use is instead of using the little folder icon over here, use that little target icon. And what that allows you to do is if you have your file window open, you can click and slowly drag and just choose the image from here. So if I choose hero banner, boom. It's just, really quick and easy if you have to change a lot of files that way to do it that way. And there you go. That's how you basically extract images from files, optimize them, save them, and insert them into your document. Later on, we're going to be working on the story area and the sidebar. And in the story area, we have 3 more images to insert, but they're already waiting for us in our list, so that part's already done. Tune in to step 5 in this process for the last stretch, and we got all the heavy lifting done. I'd say we're about 75% done with this project. What's left here is creating a nice story area and cleaning up our sidebar with a few extra bells and whistles. So tune in to lesson 5, and we're getting there. Starting to look good.